The year was 1941. Norway had fallen into darkness under the iron fist of Hitler's brutal Wehrmacht. The conquering German forces were draining the life out of the Norse country, harnessing the nation's industrial might and vast natural resources to fuel the Third Reich as it engulfed the continent. Yet, shrouded in uncertainty, the Allies remained largely ignorant of the full breadth of Germany's sinister schemes. That was until, fleeing his home country, Leif Tronstad, a scientist turned resistance fighter, arrived in England after barely escaping the claws of the Gestapo. He brought the Allies shocking and vital news about German operations in occupied Norway. The intelligence he delivered confirmed the worst speculative fears of the Allied commanders. The Germans had seized control of the Vemork hydroelectric power plant and were producing heavy water at a terrifying pace. Top Allied leaders privy to the top-secret progress of America's Manhattan Project knew heavy water was crucial in creating an atomic weapon. The largest plant in Europe was now a ticking time bomb, producing this essential ingredient in massive quantities. This production, this countdown to an unfathomable horror, had to be halted. No cost was too great, no risk too immense. And so, under the weight of this dire imperative, one of the most daring, high-stakes commando operations of World War II was put into motion. A ticking clock against a rising tide of darkness, the stage was set for a thrilling saga of courage, resolve, and audacious heroism. As the ominous specter of World War II began to take shape on the global stage, another momentous endeavor was quietly unfolding within the hallowed halls of the world's science laboratories. Scholars probed the depths of the atom, unraveling the secrets of nuclear fission theories. The proposition of harnessing colossal amounts of energy from the most minuscule particles known to humanity held the promise of revolutionizing the world, a seismic shift in our understanding that threatened to shatter all previous notions of power. Yet, as the threat of war loomed ever larger, the discourse quickly turned from one of awestruck discovery to a grim realization. The newfound understanding could pave the way for a nuclear weapon of unprecedented, horrifying potency. This frantic race to unlock the dark secrets of the atom was set off by the identification of the neutron in 1932. Scientists experimented with these particles, discovering that they could infiltrate the atom's very core. Yet, unbeknownst to them, their experiments flirted with the vanishing of mass itself, unleashing a power so colossal it mirrored the immense energy promised by Einstein's legendary equation, E equals mc squared. These discoveries opened the door to the splitting of the atom and a new godlike atomic energy source, with the unexpected discovery of fission in 1938. The immense challenge now was controlling the resulting chain reaction. Specifically, scientists needed to learn how to contain the raw, fiery energy being released until it reached an explosive critical mass. Two potentially vital solutions soon became apparent: heavy water and graphite. Meanwhile, the shadow of the swastika loomed over Europe, and Nazi Germany greatly desired to harness this new power to create their own atomic weapon. Historical records do not provide detailed information on the precise rationale leading to the German nuclear program, but post-war assessments show that Nazis pursued the heavy water approach as a way to achieve fission. The German atomic bomb project, known as the Uranverein or Uran Project, began in April 1939, just months after the discovery of nuclear fission and a few months before the onset of World War II. The project expanded into three primary efforts: the Uranmaschine, or atomic reactor, uranium and heavy water production, and uranium isotope separation. The endeavor was challenging yet technically feasible. Plutonium-239, a highly effective weapons material, required an intricate implosion-type mechanism for weaponization. Heavy water emerged as the prime moderator to produce this plutonium variant. Even though the Nazi program was severely hampered by their purge of Jewish physicists, a new hope would soon emerge for the German initiative in the form of a crucial hydroelectric power plant in Norway. A familiar figure to the German scientific community, Norwegian scientist Leif Tronstad had spent years immersed in the academic life of Berlin. but his destiny was to be tied inextricably with the potential of heavy water. Alongside Jomar Brun, the head of Norsk Hydro Ryuken, Tronstad charted a course for industrial production of heavy water in Norway, propelled by the tantalizing promise of nuclear energy as a revolutionary source of clean, abundant power. By 1934, Norsk Hydro had inaugurated a plant near the power station at Vemork. This was the world's first foray into the industrial mass production of heavy water, and it drew keen interest from both French and German scientists. Yet, as the decade wore on and fascism tightened its stranglehold over Europe, the potential dark side of nuclear fission began to cast its menace. Norway, clinging to its neutrality, believed its growing stockpile of heavy water was safe as long as it retained control over access. Nuclear fission was only discovered less than a year past before Germany's relentless march into Poland in September 1939. The Allies had barely a moment to consider a contingency plan for a potential German nuclear program, let alone formulate one. As the Wehrmacht swept Europe, the Allies waged a desperate behind-the-scenes war. Their mission, to cut off the Third Reich from the essential ingredients needed to forge a nuclear weapon. The stakes were impossibly high, and Tronstad would soon be called to action. To Hitler, Norway's neutrality was an irrelevance, and by April, he launched a ruthless invasion into the Nordic country, his eyes set on securing ice-free harbors and accessing iron ore from Swedish mines via Narvik. His attention would soon turn to the Vemork plant's hefty supply of heavy water. Tronstad, an ardent Norwegian patriot, leaped into action. He rallied local rifle associations to form a defense against the impending German onslaught. The German blitzkrieg, however, was unstoppable. Norway was soon under German control, including the all-important Vemork hydroelectric power plant. Despite the formal capitulation, Tronstad threw himself into the resistance effort, utilizing his base at the Norwegian Institute of Technology. He worked closely with the Skylark B radio agent group, transmitting vital intelligence about German activities in Norway to London. His resistance work soon placed him squarely in the crosshairs of the Germans. When his group was compromised, Tronstad had no choice but to flee. A timely warning from a friend saved him from the Gestapo, who arrived at his home moments after he went into hiding. Under cover of darkness, Tronstad traveled by car to Østfold, then on foot to Tuxfors via Orje. From there, he boarded a plane to England. Once in England, Tronstad finally met face-to-face with the British authorities. The news he brought was chilling. Germany was scaling up heavy water production at the Vemork hydroelectric power plant for its nuclear program. The Germans were on a relentless path to developing an atomic bomb, and unless they were stopped, they could achieve it before the rest of the world. Thanks to their earlier connections to the Norwegian scientific community, the French military intelligence, the Deuxième Bureau, soon became aware of Germany's interest in heavy water. They urgently launched an attempt at the first operation to steal Vemork's heavy water before a German invasion could even take place. Led by Captain Muller and Lieutenants Masse and Canal de Mars, the mission aimed to whisk away the world's supply of heavy water from the Vemork plant in still neutral Norway, hoping to outpace the German scientists in the nuclear race. Norsk Hydro's general director, Axel Aubert, fully aware of the terrifying threat a nuclear-armed Germany posed, decided to lend the heavy water to France for the duration of the war. He also knew that this choice could lead to his execution should Norway fall into German hands. Transporting this precious cargo was fraught with danger. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence, was active in Norway and had been alerted to the French activities. Undeterred, the French agents managed to clandestinely transport the heavy water to Oslo, Perth, Scotland, and France. However, by May 1940, France was no longer a sanctuary from the relentless assault of the Wehrmacht. As German tanks began to roll across the Ardennes, French nuclear scientist Frédéric Joliot-Curie took responsibility for the precious material, hiding it in a Banque de France vault and then a prison, desperate to keep the heavy water from falling into German hands. Then, as the grip of the Third Reich tightened around France, Joliot-Curie orchestrated a last-minute transfer to Bordeaux. The heavy water was hurriedly loaded onto the British tramp steamer Broompark, just as Paris succumbed to German control. The vessel sailed from the devastated nation, carrying not just the world's stock of heavy water, but also fugitive scientists and British refugees. On June 21st, the cargo arrived in Falmouth, Cornwall, England. The Allies had barely managed to prevent the world's supply of heavy water from falling into Germany's clutches. But it was a temporary victory. Hitler now controlled Vemork, and it was only a matter of time before he found a way to produce more. The Allied mission was clear, yet daunting. The Vemork hydroelectric power plant, the heart of Germany's nuclear aspirations, had to be destroyed. An air raid seemed the obvious choice, but well acquainted with the plant's layout, Tronstad threw cold water on this plan. The chemist revealed that civilian housing was too close, and the heavy water facility, nestled within an armored basement of the electrolyzing plant, was likely to survive the bombing. The British needed a new plan, one that was intricate and stealthy. In October 1942, Combined Operations Headquarters launched a two-pronged operation to destroy the Vemork plant. First, a team of Norwegians, trained by the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, would be parachuted in as an advance force, a move christened Operation Grouse. Once they had established their positions, they would progress into a new stage called Operation Freshman, where a party of British engineers would be airlifted in by glider to strike the plant. On October 18th, 4 Norwegian Commandos, trained by the SOE, descended from the sky into Norway. The vast distance they had to ski from their drop point in the wilderness to the plant meant Operation Grouse would be a slow-burn mission. The team had been tasked to commit blueprints to memory, a shift from previous failed SOE plans. The British were initially apprehensive when the Grouse team was delayed in contacting the SOE. The Norwegians had been dropped at the wrong location and had lost their way several times. But when they finally made contact, their coded message, 3 pink elephants, brought relief and joy to the British commanders. Operation Grouse was a success, paving the way for the next phase. Operation Freshman took flight on November 19, with a daring plan for a glider-borne landing on the frozen Lake Mosvatten near the plant. 2 airspeed Horsa gliders, each towed by a Handley Page Halifax bomber and carrying 15 Royal Engineers of the 9th Field Company, 1st British Airborne Division, launched from RAF Skitton near Wick, Caithness, Scotland. The hazardous journey was even more treacherous due to the long flight distance and poor visibility. Tragedy struck when one Halifax tug crashed into a mountain, with the glider it was towing crash landing nearby. Meanwhile, the other Halifax managed to reach the landing zone, but with radar beacons failing and fuel running low, the pilot decided to abort the operation and return to base. The turbulent return journey ended with the tow rope snapping and the second glider crash landing, leading to more casualties. The Gestapo captured the survivors. It was a tough pill to swallow for the Allies, unaware of the mission's fate until they intercepted a German message stating that 2 gliders and 1 warplane had been taken down, and the crews engaged and eliminated. Moreover, the failed raid had another unfavorable outcome. It alerted the Germans to the Allies' interest in their heavy water production, leading to increased defenses in the area. The surviving Norwegian Grouse team found themselves in a brutal waiting game in their mountain hideout, surviving on moss and lichen until they captured a reindeer just before Christmas. The stage was set for the next desperate attempt to halt Germany's march toward atomic power. The disastrous outcomes of Operations Grouse and Freshman had been a blow to the Allies' plans, exposing the Germans to their interest in the Vemork. However, there was a sliver of hope amidst the wreckage. The Norwegian Grouse team had evaded capture. It was likely still operational near the power plant. The British command decided to take another shot at the mission. Tronstad, the scientist turned spy, was frustrated by the shortcomings of the earlier missions and took the lead in organizing the next attempt, codenamed Operation Gunnerside. Tronstad initially wished to lead the operation and personally rig the plant with explosives, but his commanders considered him too valuable to risk and vetoed his proposal. Instead, Tronstad used his intimate knowledge of the facility and its surrounding areas to provide detailed instructions and training to the new team of saboteurs. On the night of February 16, 1943, a Halifax bomber from RAF Tempsford dropped an additional 6 Norwegian commandos into the snowy landscape. They successfully rendezvoused with the existing Grouse team, now known as the Swallow team. Together, they started making final preparations for their assault, scheduled for the night of February 27. After the botched freshman attempt, the Germans had beefed up security around the plant with mines, floodlights, and additional guards. A 75-meter bridge spanning a deep ravine above the river Mana was fully guarded, presenting a significant obstacle. The commandos decided to descend into the ravine, cross the icy river, and climb the steep hill on the other side. Their timing was fortunate, as the winter river level was low, allowing them to cross and follow a single railway track straight into the plant without encountering any guards. At 12:30 a.m., they arrived at the plant and were able to cut through the security fence using wire cutters. They moved quickly and quietly to avoid detection. Tronstad was in contact with a Norwegian agent in the plant who had provided detailed plans and schedules for the German guards. Using this information, the demolition party entered the main basement through a cable tunnel and a window. The only person they encountered inside was a Norwegian caretaker, Johansen, who was more than willing to cooperate. They then split into 2 teams, a group of 4 commandos tasked with handling the explosives, and a separate group of 5 commandos assigned to keep watch. Utilizing maps of the plant provided by Tronstad, the demolition team had initially planned on entering the heavy water area through a side entrance, but upon discovering that it was locked, they quickly adapted and found an access tunnel that they could crawl through on hands and knees. Only 2 of the 4 explosives team members emerged from the tunnel. Not willing to waste any time, the 2 saboteurs went about their work methodically, placing explosive charges on the heavy water electrolysis chambers and setting a fuse that would give them enough time to escape. While setting up the 9th chamber, a window suddenly shattered behind them with a loud crash. They turned around, ready for a fight, only to find the last 2 members of their team had finally found the facilities. To avoid reprisals against the local resistance, they planted a Thompson submachine gun as evidence that British forces carried out the operation. Despite not encountering resistance, the mission reached a boiling point seconds before the fuses were lit, when the caretaker told the saboteurs he had left his glasses somewhere in the room. Eyeglasses were a rare commodity at the time, and losing them could leave Johansen visually impaired for months or years. A frantic search ensued amid the already rigged room. Every second risked the party being discovered by German guards. As they finally found the glasses and lit the fuses, the 2 plant workers were told to run upstairs and lie down with their mouths open so their eardrums wouldn't be damaged. The explosive charges then detonated, effectively destroying the electrolysis chambers and all the heavy water reserves the Germans had produced in the last 2 years. The commandos then escaped into the cold night on their skis, despite an extensive search operation that involved more than 3,000 German soldiers. They split up to reduce the chances of being caught as they dashed across the frozen countryside. 4 made a grueling 322-kilometer ski trip to Sweden. 2 headed to Oslo to assist the local resistance, and 4 stayed behind to help the resistance in the region. The audacious operation had struck a significant blow to Germany's nuclear ambitions, with over 500 kilograms of heavy water produced during the German occupation being destroyed, along with critical equipment. While Operation Gunnerside failed to permanently knock out the Vemork plant, it halted production for several months and eradicated the Third Reich's stockpile of heavy water, a key component for their nuclear weapons program. Across the Atlantic, the Manhattan Project was making significant strides, giving the Allies a critical advantage in the race toward developing the ultimate war-ending weapon. This setback did not deter the Germans. The Vemork plant was repaired, and by April, production had resumed. The struggle to halt Germany's nuclear ambitions was far from over. Despite Leif Tronstad's initial warnings against air raids due to the proximity of civilian housing, the USAAF initiated a series of bombing raids on Vemork once production resumed. In July, the situation escalated when an American-led raid involving 161 aircraft targeted Vemork and the shipment yard at Herøya, resulting in 76 casualties, many of them civilians. The heavy water plant was not directly hit, but production stopped due to a damaged generator. It was becoming clear to the Germans that the Allies would not rest. Then, in November, the plant was targeted by a massive daylight bombing raid involving 143 B-17 heavy bombers, which dropped 711 bombs. Astonishingly, at least 600 bombs missed the plant, but the raids resulted in significant Norwegian casualties, proving Tronstad's initial assessments correct. As a response, the Germans attempted to disassemble the production facility, with plans to reassemble it in a different location in Germany. They also intended to move their remaining stock of heavy water out of Norway to continue their nuclear pursuits elsewhere. The impact of Operation Gunnerside, however, continued to play a role in the Allies' favor. Knut Haukelid, one of the Commandos, was still in the area, and when he learned of the German plan to transport the heavy water out of Norway, he recruited 2 people and decided to sabotage a ferry carrying heavy water across Lake Tinn. One of Haukelid's recruits managed to plant 8.5 kilograms of plastic explosives on the keel of SF Hydro, the ferry transporting railway cars loaded with drums of heavy water across Lake Tinn. The ferry and its cargo sank into deep water shortly after departing on February 20th, 1944. Witnesses reported seeing steel drums floating after the ferry sank, leading to speculation that they might not have contained heavy water. After the war, the records were examined, which led to the conclusion that some barrels were only half full and would have floated. Despite the mission's intention to minimize casualties, 18 people lost their lives, including 14 Norwegian passengers and crew and 4 German soldiers. Haukelid managed to delay heavy water production by sabotaging the Vemork plant in 1942. 2 years later, he completed the task by destroying the remaining stock of heavy water the Germans had produced, amid numerous Allied bombing raids and disruptions. Through these daring operations, the Allies decisively thwarted Germany's nuclear ambitions. Meanwhile, Leif Tronstad continued to aid the British in their operations in Norway, specifically in the region around Vemork. As the raids became more violent and frequent, he would often fall into despair, knowing that his decisions were causing the demise of innocent Norwegians, many of whom he knew personally. Despite his regrets and reservations, fellow scientists Rydell and Evans later wrote that Tronstad, quote, contributed directly to the speedy victory of the Allied nations, besides saving the region which came to be known as Southern England from an even longer and more severe ordeal than it actually endured. The impact of the sabotage of the Vemork plant and the sinking of the SF Hydro on Germany's nuclear program is still a topic of considerable debate. The capture of the Vemork plant gave the Germans a significant advantage in developing nuclear weapons, as they essentially controlled the only site in Europe capable of producing heavy water in substantial quantities. With Germany developing atomic bombs before the Allies, military analysts argue that if successful, this could have been one of the few scenarios in which Germany might have won the war. Furthermore, some concerning witness accounts suggest Germany might have been much closer to attaining nuclear weapons than previously believed. The U.S. National Archives released a document in the logbook from Hans Zinser, a German test pilot who reported, quote, in early October 1944, I flew away 12 to 15 kilometers from a nuclear test station near Ludwigslust. A cloud shaped like a mushroom with turbulent, billowing sections, at about 7,000 meters stood, without any seeming connections, over the spot where the explosion took place. Strong electrical disturbances and the impossibility to continue radio communication as by lighting turned up. Seeming to corroborate these harrowing accounts, Berlin historian Rainer Karlsch, in his book Hitler's Bomb, assured that German scientists carried out 3 nuclear bomb tests just before the end of World War II. However, most experts disregard these accounts, arguing that Germany never stood a chance in the nuclear arms race for several reasons. The purge of Jewish physicists, many of whom would play crucial roles in the success of the Manhattan Project, was a significant setback. Moreover, the German nuclear program was fragmented and lacked the organization and coordination of the Manhattan Project. Various groups worked on the problem in different locations without clear leadership or direction. According to some reports, Hitler abandoned the idea of creating a nuclear bomb as early as 1942, thinking it would emerge too late to influence the course of the war. As such, the program was relegated to a secondary priority. However, as the Americans would demonstrate, the atomic bomb profoundly impacted the war. When the American-led Alsos mission captured the main remaining research facility in Haigerloch in April 1945, along with several scientists involved in the German nuclear program, it became clear just how far behind Germany had fallen in the atomic race. Regardless, a nuclear-armed Germany was a risk the Allies could not afford to take, making Operation Gunnerside a crucial mission that had to be carried out at all costs. Recent investigations into the sinking of SF Hydro have confirmed that the heavy water on board was of limited purity. Most barrels contained only 0.5 to 1.0% heavy water, attesting to the success of Operation Gunnerside in destroying higher purity heavy water. The manifest indicated that only 500 kilograms of heavy water were being transported to Germany, only a tenth of the amount they would have needed. Hydro was carrying too little heavy water to supply even one reactor, let alone the 10 or more tons required to produce enough plutonium for a nuclear weapon. This evidence underscores the German nuclear program's deficiencies and Operation Gunnerside's success. Some argue that this operation dealt a significant blow to the Uranverein, convincing Hitler that pursuing nuclear weapons was not worth it. If this theory holds any truth, the Norwegian heavy water sabotage could be the most critical mission in World War II, as it may have prevented a nuclear-armed Germany from dominating the world.